Adrian Blackwood stood in front of the mirror, his hand firm on the iron, steam rising with a sharp hiss. The clock ticked past midnight, and yet he was preparing himself as if it were a royal event. His mistress was waiting in a glittering hotel downtown. The silk shirt on the board was spotless, but still, he pressed harder, smoothing every crease with an obsession that came less from love of appearance and more from pride. He wanted to look perfect, not for his wife, not for his child, but for the young woman who had stolen his loyalty. Behind him, the sound of hesitant footsteps. Elena, his wife, 5 months pregnant, approached slowly, her hand resting on the curve of her belly. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from nights without sleep. She had begged him countless times to stay, to remember the vows they once shared, but tonight her voice carried a different weight, a mother's fear. "Adrian, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't leave me like this. I'm scared. The baby needs you. I need you." He didn't turn. He didn't soften. Instead, his jaw tightened, his lips curled into a cruel smirk. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Elena. You are always weak. Stop clinging." And then, with a swiftness that froze her blood, he turned toward her. The iron, glowing red-hot, was still in his hand. Before she could move, before she could scream, he pressed it against her arm. The sound of her scream pierced the night like broken glass. She fell back, clutching her seared skin, her tears mixing with the smell of burning flesh. Her unborn child kicked violently inside her as if sharing her agony. With every ounce of strength, Elena stumbled toward the door, her bare feet slapping against the cold marble floor, until she burst into the storm outside. Rain pounded down like 1,000 needles, soaking her hair, her gown, cooling the blistering wound on her arm. The sky itself seemed to cry with her, the thunder echoing her pain. She staggered through the street, clutching her belly, each step heavier than the last. The world blurred. The lights became smears of color. Her body weakened. She collapsed onto the pavement, the rain turning the ground beneath her into a mirror of her despair. Just when darkness threatened to claim her, headlights sliced through the storm. A sleek black car screeched to a halt. From the back seat stepped a tall man, his presence radiating authority. He held an umbrella, but his eyes were fixed on her. This fragile, broken woman trembling on the street. He bent down, his voice low but strong. "You're safe now, I won't let you fall." Her body was lifted, her pain momentarily eased by the warmth of his arms. She looked up, vision blurred, but she caught the sharp lines of his face, the steady determination in his gaze. It was Gabriel Torres, a billionaire whose name shook the city. That night, when her husband tried to destroy her, fate sent her into the arms of the one man who would change everything. Elena Torres had never asked for a life of glittering diamonds or endless applause. She was not born into wealth, but into the quiet warmth of a modest family in Brooklyn. Her parents taught her that true richness was found in kindness and loyalty, not in bank accounts or luxury brands. She carried those lessons into adulthood, shaping her into a woman of quiet strength, someone who valued people more than possessions. In her early 20s, Elena was already building a name for herself as a talented interior designer. Her work was fresh yet timeless, balancing elegance with comfort. Her clients loved her because she didn't just decorate houses. She created homes. By the time she was 25, her reputation was spreading beyond her small circle, and larger opportunities were opening before her. She could have had it all on her own terms. But then she met Adrian Blackwood. He wasn't just a man, he was a storm in a tailored suit. His charm filled every room, his confidence intoxicating. Adrian promised her a future beyond imagination. Not just love, but security, adventure, a partnership of equals. Elena, who had always dreamed of building a family rooted in love, believed she had found her forever. When Adrian asked her to marry him, she didn't hesitate. She let go of her rising career, telling herself there would be time later. She moved into his grand mansion, trading her design boards for dinner parties, her independence for devotion. She poured herself into being the perfect wife, hosting his colleagues, smoothing his temper, and always standing by his side in public. When she discovered she was pregnant, her heart swelled. This was what she had longed for, the chance to nurture life, to build the family she had dreamed of since childhood. She imagined Adrian holding their child, imagined late nights filled with lullabies and whispered promises, She thought the baby would bring them closer. But instead, her pregnancy became the start of her isolation. The nausea, the fatigue, the restless nights, she endured them alone. Adrian grew colder with each passing month. He criticized her body, dismissed her needs, and mocked her fears. Every time she reached for him, he pulled away, lost in his endless hunger for more power, more wealth, more women. Still, Elena tried. She placed his meals carefully on the table. She ironed his shirts, even when her hands trembled. She wrote him letters he never read, poured her heart into conversations he never listened to. She told herself he was just stressed, that once the baby arrived, everything would change. But deep down, she felt the truth pressing against her like a stone. The man she had given everything to was slipping away. And worse, he wasn't just slipping, he was choosing to leave. Elena was 5 months pregnant, vulnerable and exhausted, when the mask of their marriage finally shattered. And it wasn't with words, it was with fire. Because on the night she begged him to stay, the man she once trusted pressed a burning iron against her skin. The Blackwood mansion stood like a fortress at the edge of the city. From the outside, it was breathtaking. Marble columns rising into the sky, fountains glittering under the moonlight, windows so tall they reflected the skyline itself. Guests who visited often whispered that it looked like a palace. To them, Adrian Blackwood had built a monument to his success. But for Elena, the mansion was a gilded cage. Inside, silence reigned. The echo of her footsteps across the polished marble floors reminded her how alone she was. The grand chandeliers sparkled every night, but there was no warmth beneath their light. Every room was immaculate, curated, and cold. The nursery she had carefully decorated with soft blues and creams sat untouched, waiting for a child she wasn't sure would be welcomed. The storm outside that night seemed to mirror her heart. Rain lashed against the glass walls, thunder growled like an unseen predator. Each crash of lightning lit up the corridors, reminding her of the emptiness surrounding her. She walked slowly, one hand on her swollen belly, the other brushing against the walls, searching for an anchor in a house that never felt like home. The dining room stretched endlessly, its long mahogany table set for 20, though only 2 people ever sat there. More often than not, only one. Adrian preferred dinners out, meetings that blurred into midnight trysts. Elena often ate alone, her plate untouched, listening to the grandfather clock tick, as if counting down the seconds of her disintegrating marriage. Her sanctuary was the small balcony overlooking the gardens. From there, she could see the storm tearing at the roses she had planted months earlier. The petals scattered like fragments of her hope. She whispered to her unborn child, telling it stories about the life she wanted to give, the love she wished it could already feel. Sometimes she pressed her hand to her belly and prayed that her voice could drown out the thunder of Adrian's cruelty. But even in her solitude, the house betrayed her. Cameras were hidden in corners, security guards reported every move. She was not a wife, she was a prisoner under watch. Adrian controlled everything, what she wore, what she ate, where she went. Even her phone calls to friends had dwindled. He dismissed them as distractions, tearing her away from the outside world. The storm grew wilder, rattling the windows as she made her way back inside. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She barely recognized herself anymore. The once vibrant designer who could transform any space into warmth now lived inside a house colder than ice. She touched her belly again, whispering, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." But even as she promised, the sound of a door slamming echoed through the mansion. Adrian had returned. His shoes clicked against the marble, his presence heavy, his anger already palpable. And this time, the storm outside would be nothing compared to the storm about to erupt inside. To the outside world, Adrian Blackwood was the definition of success. He was the man who turned a failing investment firm into a global empire. He graced the covers of business magazines, hailed as the visionary of Wall Street. At charity galas, he cut the perfect figure, tall, confident, with a smile polished enough to charm royalty. He shook hands with politicians, dined with celebrities, and signed deals worth billions. In public, he was adored, respected, envied. But behind closed doors, Adrian was a storm of cruelty and control. Elena had once believed his charm, had once basked in the glow of being the wife of a man so admired. But as the years passed, the mask slipped more often. He was quick to anger, belittling her for the smallest things. The way she arranged the flowers, the way she spoke at dinner parties, even the way she dressed. He called her ungrateful, weak, and worse. Words became weapons, and when words no longer satisfied his rage, his actions grew darker. Adrian's obsession with power fed every choice he made. It wasn't enough to be wealthy, he needed to be worshipped. His colleagues didn't see the bruises on Elena's heart, the fear in her eyes. They only saw the man who arrived in a black limousine, his hand resting on her back like a claim, as if she were a possession rather than a partner. And then there was Cassandra Vance. She was 26, ambitious, stunning in a way that drew eyes the moment she entered a room. Officially, she was Adrian's executive assistant. Unofficially, she was his mistress. She played the role flawlessly, laughing at his jokes, whispering advice in meetings, standing just close enough to be noticed, but not scandalize. To the board, she was just another rising star in the company. To Elena, she was the serpent winding tighter around her marriage. Cassandra knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't satisfied with being the other woman. She wanted it all: the money, the title, the empire. And Adrian, blinded by his ego and lust, encouraged her dreams. He began introducing her at private gatherings, slowly pushing Elena further into the shadows. The irony was bitter. Elena carried his child, yet Cassandra carried his attention. Every time Adrian returned home, the scent of expensive perfume clung to his suits. Every time Elena confronted him, he dismissed her with mocking laughter. "Don't be paranoid," he'd say. "You're imagining things. You should be grateful for the life I give you." But gratitude was impossible when every day felt like survival. On the night of the storm, when the iron left its mark on her skin, Elena realized the truth. Adrian wasn't just unfaithful. He wasn't just cruel. He was dangerous. And Cassandra, waiting in the shadows, was ready to replace her completely. What Adrian and his mistress didn't know was that Elena's suffering would soon become the spark that destroyed them both. The annual Blackwood Charity Gala was supposed to be Elena's favorite night of the year. For years, she had helped plan the event, ensuring every detail was perfect, from the crystal centerpieces to the delicate violin melodies drifting through the ballroom. The evening raised millions for children's hospitals, a cause close to her heart. But this year, as she arrived in a simple navy gown that strained gently over her pregnant belly, she already knew something was wrong. The whispers started before she even entered the room. Heads turned, eyes lingered, and muffled laughter rippled through the air like poison. Elena felt it before she saw it, an icy shift in the atmosphere, the kind of silence that meant a storm had already broken. And then she saw him. Adrian, her husband, stood at the center of the ballroom in a custom tuxedo, his hand resting firmly on the waist of Cassandra Vance. She wore a scarlet gown, bold and deliberate, her lips painted to match. The way she leaned into Adrian, laughing at something he whispered, left no doubt in anyone's mind. They weren't just business partners. They weren't just colleagues. They were lovers. Elena froze. The sight struck her like a physical blow. Her chest tightened, her breath caught, and for a moment she thought she might collapse right there in front of everyone. The room tilted. Chandeliers blurred into stars. Yet she forced herself to stand, her hand instinctively clutching her belly. She wasn't alone. Her child was with her. She couldn't crumble, not yet. Adrian spotted her across the room. Instead of shame, his lips curled into a cruel smile. He didn't move toward her. He didn't even acknowledge her as his wife. Instead, he raised a glass of champagne, tapping it lightly with a fork to draw attention. The orchestra quieted, conversations hushed, and every eye turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice smooth as silk, "thank you for being here tonight. This year's gala is about new beginnings, fresh visions, and brighter futures. And I'm proud to have someone by my side who embodies all of that." His hand slid tighter around Cassandra's waist. She blushed theatrically, lowering her eyes like a coy starlet. Gasps echoed through the room. Some guests glanced at Elena, pity in their eyes, while others smirked, savoring the scandal. Elena's heart cracked in silence. Her humiliation was complete. The man she had given up her career for, the father of her unborn child, had just erased her from her own life. She wanted to scream. She wanted to shout the truth, to tear off the mask he wore so proudly. But her voice lodged in her throat. Her body trembled, her baby kicked, and she felt herself unraveling. Still, somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. She realized something as she stood under the harsh light of betrayal. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a battle she had never imagined fighting. Because while Adrian flaunted his mistress in public, Elena was already planning the moment the world would see who he really was. The gala ended long after midnight, but for Elena, the night never ended. She left before the applause, before the last toast, before anyone could offer her a pitying glance. She slipped out through the service exit, the one used by waiters and dishwashers, her heels clicking against the cold cement floor. By the time she reached her car, her body shook so violently she could barely fit the key into the ignition. She didn't drive home. She couldn't. The mansion felt like a prison waiting to swallow her whole. Instead, she found herself parked at the edge of the river, where the city lights rippled on the water like broken glass. She sat there, hands gripping the wheel, trying to breathe through the storm inside her chest. The tears came hard and fast. They blurred her vision, soaked her dress, and made her body convulse with sobs so raw they scraped her throat. She wept for her child, for the life she thought she was building, for the love that had rotted into betrayal. Each cry seemed to echo across the empty night, but no one answered. She was utterly alone. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She almost ignored it, but habit forced her to glance at the screen. It was Adrian. For one fleeting moment, hope sparked. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he realized what he had done. With shaking hands, she answered. His voice was cold, sharp. "You embarrassed me tonight. Don't you ever show your face like that again. Do you understand me?" Before she could reply, the line went dead. The silence after was worse than the words themselves. She dropped the phone, her chest heaving. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't called to ask if she was safe. He called only to remind her of her place. Beneath him, beneath Cassandra, beneath everyone. For the first time, Elena felt herself break. Truly break. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, whispering, "I can't do this anymore. I can't." Her baby kicked, a small flutter inside her belly, as if reminding her that she was not just one, she was two. The thought should have comforted her, but instead it filled her with fear. How could she raise a child in a world where the father was a monster? How could she protect a life when she couldn't even protect herself? Her tears blurred into exhaustion. She reclined the seat, closing her eyes, the sound of the river lulling her into a fragile half-sleep. In her dreams, she saw fire, the iron pressing into her arm, the smirk on Adrian's face, the scar that would never fade. She jolted awake with a scream, clutching her belly, breathless and trembling. She looked at the horizon. Dawn was breaking, the sky bleeding into pink and gold. Another day had begun. But for Elena, it felt like the end. What she didn't know was that this lowest moment was the turning point. That fate was already moving pieces into place, and salvation was closer than she believed. The morning after the gala, the city woke to headlines praising Adrian Blackwood for his generosity. Photographs of him with Cassandra splashed across glossy magazines, a power couple on the rise. Not one word was written about Elena, the wife who had stood silently at the edge of the room, clutching her unborn child. To the world, she was invisible. But not to him. Later that afternoon, as rain still drizzled from the storm that had shaken the night, Elena stumbled from the pharmacy with a small bag of bandages and ointment. The burn on her arm throbbed beneath her sleeve, hidden but impossible to forget. Each step felt heavier, her strength draining with every block. She leaned against a lamppost, struggling to catch her breath, when a sleek black car rolled to a stop beside her. The tinted window lowered, and a man's voice cut through the damp air. "Elena Torres?" She froze. Her name hadn't been spoken with such calm certainty in months. She turned slowly, and her eyes met his. Gabriel Torres. At first, she thought she was hallucinating. The name was famous, whispered in boardrooms, written across skyscrapers. A billionaire investor, a man whose empire spanned continents. His face appeared on the covers of Fortune and Forbes. Yet here he was, standing before her in the rain, an umbrella shielding her from the drizzle. "Let me help you," he said gently, extending a hand. She hesitated. Trust had been stolen from her piece by piece. But there was something in his gaze, steady, unwavering, that made her believe, if only for a moment, that safety was possible. He guided her into the car, its leather seats warm against her trembling body. For the first time in days, she exhaled without fear. Gabriel sat across from her, studying her with quiet intensity. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked softly. Elena blinked, confused. "Should I?" A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Years ago, at a design showcase, you presented a project, a children's library built on a shoestring budget. You spoke about how spaces could heal, how colors could give comfort. I never forgot." Her eyes widened. The memory flickered. A crowded hall, a panel of judges, and a man in the audience who had lingered a moment longer than the rest. She hadn't known then that he was Gabriel Torres. "I've been following your work ever since," he continued. "And when I heard what happened last night, I couldn't stay silent." Elena's heart raced. "You were there?" "I saw everything." His voice hardened, steel beneath velvet. What Adrian did, parading his mistress while his pregnant wife stood alone, wasn't just cruel, it was unforgivable, and it won't go unanswered. Elena swallowed, her throat tight. For the first time, she wasn't just the victim of Adrian's power. Someone else had seen. Someone who mattered. Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are not alone anymore, Elena. I have resources, influence, and reasons of my own. If you're ready to fight back, I'll stand with you." Her breath caught. The world had taken so much from her, stripped her of dignity, of safety, of love. But here, in the back of a car, gliding through the storm, she felt the stirrings of something new. Hope. What she didn't realize was that Gabriel's offer carried secrets of its own, secrets that would soon shatter everything she thought she knew. The days that followed were unlike anything Elena had ever known. Instead of waking each morning to Adrian's contempt, she woke to silence. Gentle, healing silence inside the penthouse Gabriel had placed her in. It wasn't the Blackwood mansion with its marble halls and suffocating emptiness. This home was different. Warm light streamed through wide windows, soft rugs lined the floor, and vases of fresh lilies filled the air with fragrance. For the first time in months, Elena felt like she could breathe. Gabriel didn't hover, nor did he pity her. He provided what she needed: space, medical care for her burns, and protection. A team of doctors discreetly treated her injury, ensuring the scar would fade with time. Nutritionists guided her meals, focused not only on her health, but the child she carried. Each small kindness rebuilt pieces of her she thought were gone forever. But the greatest gift Gabriel offered wasn't money. It was belief. One evening, as the city lights glittered below, Gabriel sat across from her in the living room. "You gave up your career for him," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean it's gone. The Elena I saw years ago at that showcase, the woman who spoke with fire in her voice about creating spaces that heal, she's still here. She's just waiting to rise again." Elena lowered her gaze, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I don't know if I can. I feel ruined. Everything I loved, everything I trusted, it's all broken." Gabriel leaned forward. Broken things can be rebuilt, stronger, sharper, more beautiful than before. Something stirred inside her then, a faint ember glowing in ashes. She remembered the joy of sketching late at night, the thrill of seeing her ideas come alive in wood and fabric, the pride in creating beauty from nothing. Adrian had tried to smother it, but perhaps it hadn't died after all. In the weeks that followed, she began again. Gabriel arranged a small studio for her, sunlit, quiet, stocked with sketchbooks, paints, and tools. At first, her hands trembled as she held a pencil, but slowly the lines took shape. Nurseries filled with warmth, community centers alive with color, spaces designed for love, not control. Every stroke reminded her that she was more than Adrian's victim. She was Elena Torres, creator, dreamer, mother-to-be. Her body changed too. With care and rest, her face regained its glow. The dark circles faded, her cheeks flushed with new life. She no longer saw only a broken wife in the mirror. She saw a woman surviving, a woman preparing to rise. Yet transformation was never just about healing. It was also about truth. And one night, Gabriel placed a folder before her on the table. Inside were photographs, documents, recordings, proof of Adrian's corruption, affairs, and crimes. Her hands shook as she turned each page. It was everything she had suspected but never had the power to confirm. And now, in her grasp, was the weapon that could finally set her free. Elena looked up at Gabriel, her voice steady for the first time in months. What do we do with this? Gabriel's answer would ignite the fire of her rebirth and set the stage for Adrian's downfall. The night of the Bright Futures Gala arrived, the same event where Adrian had once flaunted Cassandra like a trophy while Elena stood broken. But this year, the stage would not belong to him. The ballroom was dressed in gold and crystal, chandeliers dripping light over the city's most powerful elite. Politicians, CEOs, and celebrities filled the room, gossiping about deals and scandals. Everyone expected Adrian Blackwood to deliver another grand speech. No one expected the woman he had discarded to walk through those doors transformed. Elena arrived in silence, escorted by Gabriel Torres. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the spotlight hit her. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, its fabric hugging her curves, her baby bump now a proud emblem instead of a hidden shame. Her hair cascaded down in soft waves, her skin glowing with health and strength. The woman who once wept in shadows now walked like a queen. Whispers filled the room. Is that Elena Blackwood? She looks radiant. Who's she with? And when their eyes landed on Gabriel, reclusive billionaire, powerful beyond measure, the whispers became thunder. At the center of it all, Adrian froze. His smirk faltered, his hand tightening around Cassandra's. He had built his world on control, on appearances. But in one moment, Elena shattered it simply by existing in her rebirth. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this year's special guest speaker, Elena Torres. Adrian's glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor. Cassandra whispered frantically in his ear, but her words were drowned out by the applause that rose as Elena took the stage. She stood tall, the folder Gabriel had given her tucked neatly into her clutch. The microphone crackled as she spoke, her voice steady, resonant. For years, this gala has stood for hope, for protecting the vulnerable. Yet behind closed doors, some of those who claim to champion hope are the very ones destroying it. Gasps echoed, eyes darted toward Adrian. He shifted uncomfortably, sweat gathering at his temple. Elena continued, her gaze sweeping the crowd. I was one of them. Silenced, humiliated, abused. But tonight, I will no longer be silent. Tonight, I stand not just for myself, but for every woman told to hide her scars. She opened the folder. Inside were photos, financial records, and the video footage. Adrian pressing a burning iron against her arm. The crowd erupted. Some cried out in shock, others rose to their feet in disbelief. Cameras flashed, recording every second. Adrian lunged forward, shouting, "This is a lie. She's fabricating everything." His voice cracked, desperation breaking through his polished mask. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. Elena lifted her arm, pulling back her sleeve. The scar glistened under the lights. This, she said, her voice unshakable, is the truth. Silence swept over the room. Cassandra stepped back, her face pale, as if realizing her golden throne had crumbled. Adrian stood alone, trembling in the spotlight he once craved. And then the doors burst open. Police officers entered the ballroom with a warrant in hand. The ballroom froze as the police entered. Their boots echoed across the marble floor, shattering the illusion of glamour Adrian had worked so hard to protect. Guests parted like waves, whispers turning into a roar. For years, Adrian had been untouchable. Tonight, his empire cracked wide open. Adrian Blackwood, the lead officer announced, voice cutting through the chaos. You are under arrest for domestic assault, fraud, and embezzlement. The words hung heavy, each charge slicing through his reputation like a blade. Adrian stumbled backward, his eyes wild. This is absurd. I'm Adrian Blackwood. I built this city. He looked around desperately, searching for allies among the powerful men he once controlled. But no one stepped forward. Not a single hand reached to defend him. Cassandra, trembling, slipped away from his side. She had played the mistress, the accomplice, the schemer. But when the spotlight turned harsh, she abandoned him without hesitation. Adrian watched her retreat, betrayal etched across his face, realizing too late that loyalty was a currency he had never earned. The officers seized him, cuffing his wrists in front of hundreds of flashing cameras. His shouts turned to curses, his curses to pleas. But nothing could stop the collapse. The King of Wall Street was reduced to a criminal, dragged from the ballroom like a thief. And at the center of it all stood Elena. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply breathed, deeply and freely, for the first time in years. The weight of silence lifted from her chest. She touched her belly gently, whispering, "We're safe now." The crowd erupted in applause, not for Adrian's downfall but for her courage. Strangers approached, tears in their eyes, offering words of support. For once, she wasn't invisible. She was seen, she was heard. Days later, the headlines shifted. No longer was Adrian celebrated. Now his face appeared under words like corruption, scandal, and abuser. His empire crumbled as investors fled, his company stripped apart piece by piece. The man who thought he owned the world had lost everything. Elena, however, was just beginning. With Gabriel's support, she relaunched her design career under her own name. Her first project, a women's shelter, opened its doors with a ribbon-cutting ceremony covered by every major network. She spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor, her voice steady, her scars worn with pride. When her child was finally born, Elena held him close, tears streaming down her face. In his tiny heartbeat, she heard the rhythm of a new beginning. She promised him a life filled with love, not fear, with truth, not lies. Gabriel stood beside her, not as a savior but as a partner, offering quiet strength. The world that had once mocked her now applauded. The woman who had been discarded became a symbol of resilience. And though Adrian sat behind bars, screaming at the walls of his cell, Elena no longer cared. His story was over. Hers had only just begun. Because in the end, he pressed fire against her skin, but she rose from the ashes and built an empire of her own. When Adrian was dragged away in handcuffs, the cameras didn't just follow him. They turned toward Cassandra Vance. For months, she had basked in his wealth, worn the jewels he bought, sat in the chair that once belonged to Elena. She believed she was untouchable, the new queen waiting for her crown. But the moment Adrian fell, the spotlight burned her too. Within hours, tabloids ran headlines, "The mistress behind the monster." Paparazzi followed her every step, flashing cameras as she tried to hide behind oversized sunglasses. The same society women who once envied her red gowns now sneered, whispering words like homewrecker and fool. Invitations dried up, doors slammed shut, and Cassandra's name became poison in the city's elite circles. Her career at Blackwood Enterprises ended overnight. The board, desperate to salvage what remained, dismissed her publicly, labeling her a distraction and a liability. She packed her office in silence, carrying out the last of her designer shoes in cardboard boxes, while colleagues whispered behind her back. The empire she had schemed to inherit had vanished like smoke. But the true humiliation came later. One evening, Cassandra returned to her luxury apartment, only to find the locks changed. The rent had been paid by Adrian, and without his money, the lease was terminated. She stood in the hallway with her luggage piled around her, the flashing bulbs of reporters reflecting in her tears. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, but it wasn't Adrian calling. It was creditors, gossip outlets, and strangers spitting hate. For the first time, Cassandra felt the sting of being discarded. Adrian had promised her the world, but he had left her with nothing but scars on her reputation. Meanwhile, Elena's star was rising. Every newspaper carried her story of survival. Her bravery at the gala became a symbol, her scar a reminder of resilience. Women across the city wrote letters thanking her for speaking out. Organizations reached out to collaborate with her design projects, eager to stand with her. And at every mention of Elena's triumph, Cassandra's shame deepened. Late at night, Cassandra stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of a cheap motel room. Her mascara smudged, her once perfect curls limp. She hardly recognized the woman she had become. Anger burned in her chest, not just at Adrian, but at Elena. She convinced herself that Elena had stolen the sympathy that should have been hers. Her bitterness grew into obsession. In whispered phone calls, Cassandra began reaching out to journalists, offering inside stories in exchange for cash. She painted herself as the victim, claiming Adrian had manipulated her as much as Elena. Some reporters bit, publishing sympathetic profiles, but most dismissed her as desperate. Still, she refused to vanish, because deep inside, Cassandra was plotting. If Adrian's empire was gone, perhaps she could build her own from its ashes. And as Elena prepared for her child's future, she had no idea that the woman who once sat in her chair was planning a dangerous return. Weeks after Adrian's arrest, Elena's world slowly began to shift. The darkness that once smothered her life gave way to slivers of light. She woke each morning to the sound of birds outside the penthouse Gabriel had secured for her, not to the echo of slammed doors or cruel words. She touched her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of her child's kicks, and whispered, "We're safe now." Therapy sessions helped her release the fear that had coiled tight inside her. At first, her words shook with hesitation, but gradually they flowed with courage. She spoke about the iron pressed to her skin, the humiliation of the gala, the loneliness of the mansion. Each time she spoke, the weight lifted, piece by piece. The scar on her arm remained, but instead of shame, it became a mark of survival. She poured her energy into her design studio. Projects began to pour in: community centers, schools, and shelters. Her vision of creating spaces that healed resonated deeply, especially with women who had endured their own battles. Elena realized her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to every woman who had been silenced, every mother who had been abandoned, every survivor who had been underestimated. At her first project launch, she stood in front of a renovated women's shelter, ribbon in hand, cameras flashing. "This isn't just about architecture," she said, voice steady. "It's about dignity, about giving women and children a safe place to dream again." Applause filled the air. For the first time in years, Elena felt proud, not as someone's wife, not as someone's victim, but as herself. Gabriel remained close, though never overbearing. He walked beside her, offering quiet support. Their bond deepened, built not on pity, but on respect. One evening, as they reviewed blueprints together, he said softly, "You're not just rebuilding buildings, Elena. You're rebuilding lives, and you're rebuilding yourself." His words lingered in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with hope. Her child growing up surrounded by love, her career flourishing, her life no longer defined by pain. But as Elena healed, a shadow lingered beyond her sight. Cassandra Vance watched from the margins of society, her resentment growing like a poison vine. She read every article praising Elena, saw every photo of her standing radiant beside Gabriel, and felt fury burn inside her chest. To Cassandra, it was all unfair. She convinced herself that Elena had stolen the sympathy, the spotlight, and even the billionaire ally that could have been hers. In her desperation, Cassandra began to meet with dangerous people, men who thrived on scandals, who traded secrets for money. She whispered promises, offered information, and hinted at revenge. If she couldn't regain her status, she would at least ensure Elena's fell. One night, alone in her dingy motel, Cassandra pinned Elena's photograph to the wall. Her lips curved into a bitter smile as she whispered, "You may have won the world's heart, Elena, but I will be the one to take it away." And while Elena prepared for a future of light, a storm of shadows was already gathering to strike again. Elena's life was finally beginning to resemble the dream she once thought she had lost forever. The women's shelter she designed buzzed with laughter and activity. Her studio's walls were covered with sketches of future projects, and her belly grew rounder with every passing day. She carried herself with a quiet strength now, walking into rooms not as a shadow of Adrian's empire, but as a woman building her own. But far from the warm applause and glowing headlines, Cassandra Vance plotted in silence. The mistress who had once strutted across the ballroom in red silk now lurked in the city's underbelly, her pride shattered, her future crumbling. She watched Elena's rise through news clippings and social media, every post like salt rubbed into a wound. To Cassandra, Elena wasn't just thriving, she was thriving at Cassandra's expense. One evening, Cassandra sat in the corner of a smoky bar, a glass of cheap whiskey in her hand. Across from her was a man with sharp eyes and a smirk that suggested danger. He was a disgraced journalist, fired for fabricating stories but still hungry for scandal. "You really want to destroy her?" he asked, swirling his drink. Cassandra leaned forward, her nails tapping the glass. "Not just destroy her, I want to make the world turn on her. She thinks she's a saint now, some symbol of hope. I'll make her look like a liar." The journalist grinned. "Then you'll need proof, or at least something that looks like it." Together, they hatched a plan. Cassandra would provide private details she had gathered during her time with Adrian, stories twisted into half-truths, whispers turned into daggers. With the right spin, Elena could be painted not as a survivor, but as a manipulator, a woman who used her scars for fame and fortune. Within weeks, rumors began to surface. Anonymous blogs claimed Elena's burn scars weren't from Adrian at all, but from a clumsy kitchen accident. Others suggested her relationship with Gabriel was nothing more than a calculated move to secure wealth. The ugliest stories accused her of exploiting abused women to further her career. At first, Elena ignored them. She had learned not to chase every whisper of gossip. But then, at a project meeting, she noticed the way one of her partners avoided her gaze, the way a donor politely declined further involvement. The lies were spreading, seeping into the very foundation of her work. One night, Gabriel found her in the studio, staring at her sketches with tears in her eyes. "It's starting again," she whispered. "They're trying to silence me." Gabriel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We'll fight this. But you need to be ready. It won't stop here. Whoever's behind this won't rest until you fall." Elena lifted her head, her eyes burning with the same fire that had carried her through the darkest nights. "Then let them come. I won't break this time." What she didn't know was that Cassandra's next move wouldn't just target her reputation. It would strike at the very heart of her new life. The rumors had been cruel, but Elena could endure whispers. What she couldn't ignore was the creeping sense of danger that followed her like a shadow. It began with small things. A car parked outside the penthouse for hours, anonymous calls that ended with silence, a package delivered with no sender and no contents inside but a single red ribbon. Gabriel doubled her security, insisting she travel with guards. Still, Elena felt exposed. Carrying her child, she had more to lose than ever before. Every kick inside her belly reminded her that she wasn't just fighting for herself now, she was fighting for the tiny life depending on her. Cassandra, meanwhile, was unraveling. The failed smear campaign had only deepened her obsession. Watching Elena glow in magazine spreads, Cassandra's envy twisted into hatred. She told herself that Elena had stolen everything: Adrian's empire, Gabriel's loyalty, the public's sympathy. In Cassandra's mind, there was only one way to even the scales: make Elena suffer where it hurt most. Late one night, Cassandra met a man in a dimly lit parking garage. He was broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath a hood. She handed him an envelope thick with cash. "I want her scared," she hissed. "I want her to know she isn't untouchable. Do whatever it takes. Just don't kill her." "Yet." The man nodded, pocketing the money. Days later, Elena was leaving her design studio when she felt it, the prickle of unease on the back of her neck. She tightened her coat around her belly, her steps quickening toward the waiting car. Suddenly, a van screeched to a halt at the curb. Two men jumped out, faces covered. "Get her!" one shouted. Elena's heart pounded. She stumbled backward, clutching her stomach. Fear exploded in her chest, but before they could grab her, Gabriel's security team rushed forward. Shouts filled the air, fists collided, and the sound of sirens pierced the night. The attackers fled, disappearing into the maze of city streets. Shaken, Elena collapsed into Gabriel's arms as he reached her. "It's the baby," she gasped. I felt something." He didn't hesitate. "Hospital, now." In the sterile brightness of the emergency room, Elena lay trembling, machines beeping around her. Every second felt like eternity as doctors checked the baby's heartbeat. Gabriel held her hand, his jaw tight, fury burning in his eyes. Finally, the doctor looked up with a measured smile. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. The child is safe. But you need rest, Elena. Stress like this is dangerous." Relief washed over her in tears. She turned to Gabriel. "Someone wanted to hurt us. This isn't random." He squeezed her hand. "I know, and I'll find out who, no matter what it takes." Meanwhile, in her motel room, Cassandra watched the news report of the attempted attack. The headline read, "Pregnant philanthropist targeted, escapes harm." Instead of satisfaction, fury consumed her. Elena had survived again, stronger than before. And so Cassandra vowed that the next strike wouldn't fail. This time she would make sure Elena lost everything. Gabriel had built his empire on knowledge, numbers, markets, secrets. He knew how to trace the unseen threads that connected power to downfall. And now every instinct told him that Elena's attack wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated it. He didn't trust the police to act fast enough. Too many of them had once bowed to Adrian's influence. So he turned to his own team. Private investigators, cybersecurity experts, men and women loyal only to him. Within days, they uncovered the first trail. An envelope of cash passed in a parking garage. Grainy footage from a traffic camera caught the exchange. The woman's face was partially hidden, but her posture was unmistakable. Cassandra Vance. Gabriel's fist clenched as he watched the video. She won't stop, he muttered. She's not just bitter, she's dangerous. When he told Elena, she sat in silence for a long time. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, her eyes filled not with fear but with resolve. I should have expected this, she whispered. Cassandra was always circling like a vulture, but now I know. This isn't about Adrian anymore. She wants to destroy me. Gabriel reached across the table, taking her hand. She won't succeed, I'll see to that. But Elena shook her head. This isn't just your fight, Gabriel. It's mine. She took my husband, humiliated me in public, tried to steal my place, and now she's coming after my child. I won't run anymore. I won't hide. If Cassandra wants a war, she'll get one. Her words were steady, but that night as she lay awake, Elena wrestled with doubt. She had rebuilt so much, but was she truly ready to face the woman who had nearly destroyed her? She touched the scar on her arm, the burn Adrian had left, and felt her baby kick beneath her palm. That was her answer. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her child's future. Meanwhile, Cassandra spiraled deeper into obsession. Her motel room walls were covered with clippings of Elena's face, red ink circling every headline that praised her. Empty bottles of wine littered the floor. She muttered to herself, voice rising and falling in a manic rhythm. They think she's pure, perfect, but I'll show them the truth. I'll make them hate her. I'll make her beg. Her journalist ally grew nervous. Cassandra, you're going too far. The police are watching. Gabriel Torres is watching. You should disappear while you can. But Cassandra's laugh was sharp and hollow. Disappear? No. I've disappeared my whole life. This time they'll remember me, even if it's in fire and ruin. Back at the penthouse, Gabriel presented Elena with a thick folder. Inside was undeniable proof of Cassandra's dealings, payments, threats, connections to the attackers. Elena flipped through the pages slowly, her resolve hardening with every line. She looked up, her voice calm but firm. Then it's time. No more hiding, no more silence. Cassandra wanted to play with my life. Now she'll face me in the open. Neither woman knew that the stage for their final confrontation was already being set, and when they met, only one would walk away unbroken. The invitation arrived on Elena's desk in an ivory envelope, its seal pressed with the crest of the Metropolitan Arts Council. At first, she thought it was another event praising her work, another platform where she could speak about resilience and renewal. But when Gabriel's team checked the guest list, his expression hardened. She'll be there, he said simply. Cassandra. The council gala was the perfect stage, public, prestigious, dripping with cameras. It was exactly the kind of place where Cassandra would try to strike. Elena stared at the invitation, her fingers trembling only slightly. Then let her come, she whispered. I'm done running. The night of the gala, the air outside the museum was electric. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks, gowns swept across the marble steps, and journalists lined the entrance. Elena arrived in a gown of deep sapphire, her scar faint but visible, no longer hidden. Beside her walked Gabriel, his presence commanding. But it was Elena who drew the eyes, her quiet power eclipsing the glitter around her. Inside, the room glittered with chandeliers, champagne flowing as laughter echoed. Elena mingled with donors, her smile warm, her voice steady, yet her heart beat with anticipation. She knew Cassandra would come. She could feel it. And then she appeared. Cassandra swept into the room in a crimson dress, her hair curled into glossy waves, her smile sharp as a blade. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests gasped at the audacity of her return, others whispered eagerly, sensing drama. Cassandra thrived on it, striding forward with a confidence born of madness. Their eyes locked across the room. Elena's calm met Cassandra's fire, and for a long moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Cassandra approached, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. She stopped only a foot away, her smile venomous. Enjoying the spotlight, Elena? Must be nice to steal everything that wasn't yours. Elena's voice was low but clear. I didn't steal anything. I survived what you tried to help destroy. Cassandra laughed, the sound brittle. Survived? You think you're some kind of hero? No. You're a fraud. You hide behind your scars, behind Gabriel, behind your sob story. Without it, you're nothing. The crowd around them grew silent, ears straining to catch every word. Cameras began to flash, recording the confrontation. Elena didn't flinch. She placed a hand over her belly and lifted her chin. I don't need to prove myself to you, Cassandra. The truth already destroyed Adrian. And if you keep coming for me, it will destroy you too. For the first time, Cassandra's smile faltered. But then her eyes gleamed with malice. She leaned closer, her whisper venomous. You don't understand, do you? Adrian was only the beginning. I still have cards you can't imagine. And when I play them, you'll lose everything. Your career, your child, even Gabriel. Elena's breath caught, but she held her ground. The crowd's murmurs swelled, confusion and tension rising. Gabriel stepped closer, his hand protective at her back. And then, from across the room, a man's voice called out, revealing a secret that would change the course of the battle forever. The room stilled at the sound of the voice. Deep, commanding, familiar to many in the city's elite. Guests turned as a man stepped forward from the far end of the hall, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. It was Victor Hale, former CFO of Blackwood Enterprises and Adrian's once most trusted confidant. But he was more than that. His eyes locked onto Cassandra with a look that mixed fury and betrayal. You want to talk about secrets? Victor's voice rang across the marble hall. Then let's tell them all, Cassandra. Let's tell them what you've really been doing. Gasped Spread. Cameras swiveled, reporters elbowing for position. Elena's heart raced as she glanced between Cassandra and Victor, sensing the ground shifting beneath her feet. Cassandra's smile faltered, her knuckles tightening around her glass. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know, Victor spat. I know about the shell accounts. I know about the offshore transfers. And I know you weren't just Adrian's mistress. You were his partner in crime. The money laundering wasn't his idea alone. It was yours. The crowd erupted, whispers slicing through the room like knives. Elena's breath caught. She had expected venom from Cassandra, but not this. Not a revelation that tied her to the very empire that had nearly destroyed her. Cassandra's mask cracked. She stepped forward, her voice sharp. Lies. All lies. He's trying to save himself by dragging me down. Don't listen to him. But Victor only laughed bitterly. Save myself? I've already lost everything because of Adrian, and because of you. But I won't let you climb over Elena's shoulders to build a new empire. Not when I can expose every dirty deal you ever made. Elena's head spun. She wanted to step back, to escape the whirlwind of accusations, but something inside her held steady. This wasn't her battle alone anymore. Cassandra's schemes were finally unraveling before the world's eyes. Cassandra turned to the crowd, desperation creeping into her smile. Can't you see, they're all against me? Adrian betrayed me, Victor resents me, Elena envies me. You're all jealous because I was the only one strong enough to take what I wanted. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch, but the crowd was no longer on her side. Whispers of criminal and liar spread like wildfire. Then Victor dropped the final blow. He held up a flash drive, small and unassuming. On here, he declared, is every transaction, every document, every message that proves Cassandra Vance was not just Adrian's mistress, but the architect of his downfall. And if the authorities don't already have it, they will by morning. Cassandra's face drained of color. For the first time, true fear flickered in her eyes. Elena stood frozen, one hand resting protectively over her belly as the storm swirled around her. Gabriel leaned closer, whispering, "This is bigger than we thought. Cassandra isn't just jealous, she's dangerous, and desperate people are unpredictable." And in that charged silence, Cassandra made a sudden move that would place Elena and her unborn child in immediate peril. The air in the gala hall was suffocating. Victor's words still echoed, the flash drive glinting in his hand like a dagger of truth. All eyes were fixed on Cassandra, who stood trembling, her crimson dress blazing under the lights. For a moment, it looked as if she might crumble under the weight of exposure. But then something inside her snapped. Her lips twisted into a feral smile. She dropped her glass, the shards scattering across the marble floor. The sudden crash made guests flinch, some stepping back in fear. Cassandra's voice rang out, sharp and wild. "You think you can ruin me? You think you can take everything away? No, I'll take it back. I'll take all of it back." Before anyone could react, she lunged toward Elena. The crowd gasped as Cassandra's hands shot out, shoving against Elena's shoulder with reckless force. Elena staggered, clutching her belly, her heels sliding against the polished floor. Gabriel caught her just in time, steadying her trembling body. "Stay back!" Gabriel roared, positioning himself between Elena and Cassandra. His guards rushed forward, but Cassandra was quicker, grabbing a knife from the buffet table, a silver blade meant for carving roasts, now gleaming with menace. Guests screamed, scattering in panic. Security scrambled to contain the chaos, but Cassandra slashed the air wildly, her eyes locked on Elena with unhinged fury. "You stole my life," she shrieked. "You don't deserve him, the fame, the sympathy. It should have been mine." Elena's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Fear surged, but so did something stronger, a protective fire. She stood her ground, one hand pressed firmly against her belly, the other clutching Gabriel's arm for balance. "Cassandra, stop!" Elena's voice rang out, steady despite the tremor in her body. "This isn't about me. This is about you and the choices you made. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become." But Cassandra only laughed, a sound brittle and broken. "No, I won't be forgotten. If I can't rise, then I'll drag you down with me." With a sudden cry, Cassandra lunged again, the knife glinting as it arced toward Elena. Time seemed to slow. Gasps filled the hall. Camera flashes stuttered like lightning, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Then, impact. A figure moved faster than anyone expected. Victor lunged forward, tackling Cassandra to the ground. The knife clattered across the marble floor, spinning out of reach. The two struggled, Cassandra thrashing and screaming, her face twisted with rage. Security swarmed, pulling them apart, resting her arms behind her back. Elena collapsed into Gabriel's embrace, her body shaking violently. The baby kicked hard inside her, a sharp reminder of how close she had come to disaster. Tears welled in her eyes, relief flooding her veins. But even as Cassandra was dragged away, her voice rang out, shrill and venomous. "This isn't over, Elena. You may have won tonight, but I will haunt you until everything you love is destroyed." The room fell into silence, guests staring in shock, journalists scribbling furiously. Elena knew her battle wasn't finished. Cassandra might be restrained, but desperation like hers didn't vanish so easily. And as Elena clutched her belly, another sharp pain shot through her, a pain that warned the danger to her child had only just begun. The moment the sharp pain tore through Elena's body, her knees buckled. Gabriel caught her before she hit the floor, panic flashing across his usually steady face. "She needs a hospital, now," he shouted, his voice commanding enough to cut through the chaos. Security cleared a path as Gabriel scooped Elena into his arms. She clutched her belly, gasping, her face pale. The crowd watched in horrified silence as the woman they had just applauded was rushed out of the gala. Flashbulbs exploded, capturing every desperate second. Outside, the rain had begun again, soft drops falling like tears from the sky. Gabriel's car screeched away from the curb, sirens already blaring in the distance. Elena lay across the back seat, her breath shallow, her hands gripping Gabriel's tightly. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice raw. "Don't you dare give up. Not now." Her eyes fluttered open, filled with fear and pain. "The baby. Gabriel, please, don't let me lose the baby." Traffic lights blurred past as the driver sped through the city. Every second felt like a lifetime. The tension in the car wound so tight it could shatter. Gabriel never let go of her hand, whispering reassurances he barely believed himself. At the hospital, doctors rushed to meet them at the emergency entrance. Elena was whisked onto a gurney, monitors beeping, nurses barking orders. Gabriel tried to follow, but a nurse held up a firm hand. "You have to wait here, sir." He froze in the corridor, the sterile white walls pressing in on him. He wasn't a man who ever waited. He was a man of action, of control. But now, all he could do was sit in a plastic chair, his head in his hands, praying for 2 lives instead of 1. Inside the delivery ward, Elena fought through waves of pain. Her mind flashed with memories. Adrian's iron burning her skin, Cassandra's knife flashing under the chandeliers, the moments she thought she wouldn't survive. But stronger than those memories was the image of her unborn child. Innocent, fragile, worth every ounce of fight she had left. "Breathe, Elena. Stay calm," the doctor urged. "We're monitoring the heartbeat. It's weak, but steady. We need to reduce the stress on your body." Tears slid down Elena's cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "please save my baby." Hours dragged like centuries. Gabriel paced the waiting room, each footstep echoing his helplessness. Reporters swarmed outside. their voices muffled through the glass doors, demanding updates on the woman whose story had captured the city. But Gabriel cared only for the muffled sounds beyond the operating room. Finally, the door swung open. The doctor stepped out, his expression unreadable. Gabriel surged forward. "Tell me, how is she?" The doctor exhaled slowly. "She's stable, but there were complications. The next 24 hours will decide everything, for both mother and child." Relief and dread collided in Gabriel's chest. He pushed past the doctor into the dimly lit recovery room. Elena lay pale against the sheets, her eyes heavy but open. She reached for his hand. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice fragile, "promise me. If I don't make it, protect our baby." Before Gabriel could answer, alarms blared. The baby's heartbeat was faltering again. The alarms screamed through the hospital room, each piercing beep echoing the fragility of life itself. Nurses flooded in, adjusting monitors, shouting vitals. Elena clung to Gabriel's hand, her breath ragged, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't let them take my baby," she whispered, her voice trembling yet fierce. "Fight, Elena," Gabriel urged, his grip firm. "You've come too far to stop now." The doctor's commands filled the air. "We need to stabilize both. Prepare for emergency intervention." Minutes stretched like hours, the line between hope and despair razor thin. Then, just as Gabriel thought his heart would break, the monitor steadied. A tiny, rapid heartbeat filled the room, weak but alive. Relief crashed over him like a tidal wave. Tears burned his eyes as he bent to kiss Elena's forehead. "She's safe," the doctor said, a rare smile softening his face. "Both mother and child are safe." Exhaustion claimed Elena, but not before she heard the sweetest sound, the cry of her newborn. They placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Welcome to the world, my little warrior." The city outside celebrated too. News broke within hours. Elena Torres survives attempted attack, welcomes baby girl. Support poured in from across the globe. Donations flooded her foundation. Letters arrived from women, inspired by her strength. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a symbol of hope. But Cassandra's story ended very differently. The footage of her attack at the gala spread like wildfire, paired with Victor's damning evidence. By the time police arrived at her motel, she was frantic, pacing like a trapped animal. The walls lined with Elena's photos told the story of her obsession, her downfall. She was arrested, charged with conspiracy, attempted assault, and financial crimes tied to Adrian's empire. As cameras flashed during her perp walk, Cassandra screamed Elena's name, her face twisted with venom. But the world no longer listened. She wasn't a mistress draped in red silk anymore. She was a criminal, shackled and forgotten. Elena, cradling her baby, watched the news coverage from her hospital bed. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Instead, she whispered softly, "It's over. She can't hurt us anymore." Gabriel stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "It's more than over, Elena. You've won. Not just against Adrian. Not just against Cassandra. You've won your life back." Weeks later, Elena returned to her work, this time with her daughter in her arms. The Women's Shelter Project grew into a movement, supported by leaders across the world. Her story wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding, about proving that even the deepest scars could give rise to the strongest futures. At the ribbon cutting of her second shelter, Elena stood before the crowd, her baby resting peacefully against her chest. Cameras flashed, but this time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like fire. Her voice carried strong and clear. "They tried to silence me with fear. They tried to break me with pain. But I stand here today to say this. No woman is powerless. No scar defines you. And no betrayal can destroy you unless you let it." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping tears. Gabriel's eyes shone with pride, but it was Elena's strength that lit the room. From ashes she had risen, and with her child in her arms, she was ready to build an empire of hope that no one could ever tear down again. So, that's it, my dear friends. Our story has reached its end. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something in Elena's journey has touched your heart. Maybe it's her pain, maybe it's her strength, or maybe it's the reminder that even in the darkest storms, light can break through. The message is simple, yet powerful. No betrayal, no scar, no tragedy has the power to define us unless we allow it to. As Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Elena's story proves that. She was betrayed, burned, humiliated, yet she rose again, stronger, wiser, and filled with a fire that nothing could extinguish. We can all take this into our own lives. Maybe you've been hurt, maybe you've been underestimated, maybe life has tried to break you. But scars are not just wounds, they are proof that you survived. They are your strength written on your skin. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." And so it is with our hearts. Belena's rebirth is not just fiction. It's a mirror. A reminder that healing is possible, that dignity can be reclaimed, and that every ending can also be a beginning. Her empire wasn't built on wealth or power. It was built on resilience, on choosing love over fear, and on the courage to keep moving forward when it felt impossible. So I invite you, if her story stirred something inside you, to carry this lesson into your own journey. Protect your peace, value your worth, and never let someone else's cruelty decide your future. And now, my friends, if you felt even one spark of inspiration tonight, do me a small favor. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Because together, through stories like these, we remind each other of the strength we already carry. Your scars are not the end of your story. They are the beginning.